My daughter asked me not to come to her wedding. The next day, I received a photo from the ceremony, and next to her stood a woman, an exact copy of me. 17 missed calls. I'm glad you're here with me. Please listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. I used to think the quiet mornings in my house meant stability. I'd wake up before the sun, put on the kettle, and sit by the kitchen window while the neighborhood slowly came alive. The world felt predictable then, like the soft hum of the refrigerator and the gentle creak of the old oak chair were tiny guarantees that nothing important would slip out from under me. My daughter Emily had always been part of that rhythm. Even when she'd grown up and moved across town, she still called every Sunday morning, always around 10, as if the habit had been built into her bones. But as I later realized, habits can rot quietly long before they break. It started small, a few missed calls, a couple of postponed lunches. She blamed work, of course. Her job at the clinic had always been demanding, but there was something different about the pauses in her explanations. They lasted a beat too long. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd smile tightly and say, "I'm just busy, Mom." As if repeating the word busy would make it true. I tried not to make anything out of it. Children grow, lives expand, routines loosen. That's what I told myself. Still, there were evenings when I sat in my living room, TV droning in the background, realizing she hadn't called me in over a week. I'd scroll through our old text threads just to reassure myself she was still there. Maybe that would have been the end of it. Just a gradual drifting, if not for the woman. I met her only once before everything unfolded, though I didn't understand the significance then. Emily had invited me to try on dresses with her. "Just a quick opinion," she'd said. I'd been grateful. Weddings are one of those rare milestones where mothers are still allowed to matter. But when I arrived, Emily wasn't alone. A woman stood beside her, flipping through a rack of ivory fabrics. She had a neat, confident posture and spoke to my daughter like she'd known her for years. "This is Linda," Emily said without meeting my eyes. "She's been helping me with the wedding." Linda, a simple enough name, harmless even. But something in the way she looked at me, calm, measured, faintly assessing, made my stomach tighten. I extended a polite hand anyway. Her grip was firm, too firm. And, absurd as it sounds, I couldn't shake the sense that she was studying me, memorizing me. Later, when I commented on a dress I thought suited Emily, Linda gently overrode me, offering an alternate suggestion. "This one highlights your shoulders better," she said, her tone smooth and confident, as if I weren't even there. Emily nodded eagerly. I tried to ignore the sting, but the unease lingered. Over the next weeks, Linda seemed to appear everywhere, mentioned in passing, referenced in conversations, woven silently into Emily's routines. Linda said this. Linda thinks that. Linda suggested. Her presence seeped into my daughter's life like water under floorboards, quiet and unremarkable until it began to warp the wood. One evening, I drove by Emily's house to drop off a family photo album she had asked for. Her car was there, lights warm through the curtains. But when I rang the bell, it was Linda who opened the door. "Oh," she said, as if mildly surprised. Emily's voice floated from inside, faint and hurried. "Tell her I'll call later." Linda smiled too smoothly, thanked me for the album, and closed the door before I could ask a single question. I stood there for a moment on the porch, holding my keys tightly, listening to muffled conversation on the other side. The wind felt colder than it should have. A mother shouldn't have to wonder who's replacing her. The next Sunday, Emily didn't call, or the Sunday after. When I finally reached her, her tone was brisk, almost impersonal. "Mom, things are hectic right now. The wedding is complicated. I just need space to focus." Space. That was when the dread began to bloom in me. Slow, cold, deliberate. But nothing prepared me for the moment she delivered the blow. It was a Tuesday afternoon, warm and deceptively peaceful. I was sitting on the back porch trimming dead leaves off the potted ferns when my phone buzzed. Emily's name lit the screen. Relief washed over me until I heard her voice. "Mom," she began, breathless, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to understand." My hands tightened around the pruning shears. I think it's better if you don't come to the wedding." The words hit harder than any physical blow I'd ever taken. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "Emily, what are you talking about?" "I'm your mother." "I know," she whispered, "but things are complicated. There are dynamics, people who make me uncomfortable. I just want the day to be peaceful." "People? You mean me?" Silence. A long, terrible silence. Then, "Please don't make this harder." When the call ended, I sat frozen on the porch, staring at the ferns scattered around my feet. A squirrel hopped across the fence. A car door slammed somewhere down the street. The world carried on, oblivious. That night, I barely slept. My phone stayed on the nightstand, screen lighting up the dark room each time I checked it, hoping she'd reconsider. She didn't. The next morning, an image lit the screen, sent by a distant cousin who'd attended the ceremony. A smiling Emily in her gown, the flowers, the archway. But my eyes locked instantly on the woman beside her. Linda. Except not Linda. This woman looked exactly like me. Not similar, not vaguely reminiscent. A precise, eerie mirror. My face, my build, my hairstyle. Standing where I should have stood. My breath caught. My hands went cold. In the corner of the screen were 17 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. A question rose in me, sharp and horrifying. Who was she, and why had my daughter replaced me? When I finally managed to steady my breathing, the wedding photo still glowed on my phone like an accusation. The woman beside Emily had my posture, my coloring, even the same soft creases at the corners of the eyes. Details you can't fake easily. But her smile was wider, brighter, too eager. A performance? Or maybe a mask. I zoomed in, expecting the illusion to break under scrutiny, but the resemblance only sharpened. 17 missed calls blinked up at me. No names, just numbers I didn't recognize. My first impulse was to call back, but something stopped me. An instinct, cold and immediate. Nothing about this situation was random. Nothing felt safe. I set the phone down and sat on the edge of the bed. The house was painfully quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you realize how long you've been living inside assumptions. How long I'd believed Emily's small distancing was temporary, just a season. Now the truth rolled over me like a slow, heavy tide. I'd already been replaced long before that photo was taken. I tried to catalog the losses logically. The relationship, that was obvious. The trust, the routine, the familiar rhythm of Sundays. But beneath that lay the deeper fear. What had changed Emily so completely? What had made her push me out of her life so thoroughly that another woman, my double, could stand in my place? Every scenario felt invasive, humiliating. I remembered that dress shopping afternoon, Linda's assessing gaze, the way she guided my daughter so confidently. Could Linda and this woman be connected? Were they the same? The resemblance didn't match, but Linda had moved around my daughter's life with the ease of someone who believed she had authority. Then the more practical fear came, the kind that wraps around your ribs like wire. If someone had taken my place at a wedding, what else might they try to claim? My relationship? My identity? My history with my own daughter? I forced myself up and walked through the house slowly, as if reacquainting myself with my own territory. The framed photos on the wall, birthdays, holidays, Emily's school plays, looked like artifacts from a life that had been quietly rewritten in my absence. Had Emily shown those photos to that woman? Had the woman studied them? Practiced the expressions? My chest tightened. The first real step was admitting that I was frightened. Not panicked, not desperate, just deeply, rationally afraid. Whoever this woman was, she knew enough to imitate me convincingly. That meant she had information, access, a motive. I closed the curtains, checked the locks, not because I believed anyone was coming for me, but because it grounded me. Fear sharpens you if you let it. It becomes a lens. That afternoon, I sat at the dining table with a notepad, the same one I kept for grocery lists. I wrote down what I knew. Emily had pushed me away abruptly. Linda had appeared suddenly in Emily's life. A woman identical to me stood beside my daughter at the wedding. 17 missed calls followed. Emily had not contacted me since. I stared at those 5 points. They read like the beginning of a story I didn't remember living. I needed clarity, not dramatics, not accusations, facts. My first plan formed slowly, deliberately. Gather information quietly. Nothing reckless. Nothing that could be twisted against me. I wasn't confronting Emily yet. Not when she was clearly under someone else's influence. And certainly not before I understood who that woman was. A question hovered. Where do you even begin when someone has taken your place? I started with the simplest, safest step. I searched the numbers that had called me. One belonged to a nearby event photographer, one to a floral vendor, and the others were likely from guests. Probably people who assumed I'd missed the ceremony by accident. But the calls had all come within the same hour. Why would complete strangers call me? Unless someone had told them I was meant to be there, or worse, told them I wasn't. For a moment I considered calling the photographer back, but that would only raise suspicion. Instead, I drafted a brief email asking whether any additional photos were available. A harmless question. No one would think twice. Next, I checked my social media, even though I rarely used it. Emily had posted nothing. No wedding pictures, no captions, no acknowledgments. It was as if the day hadn't happened. My stomach twisted. Emily wasn't someone who hid milestones. Was she ashamed, conflicted, controlled? I stared at her profile photo, an older picture of us together at the beach, both squinting at the sun. She hadn't updated it in years. Why keep an image of us publicly visible but privately push me away? I found myself whispering aloud, "What did they tell you, Emily?" The question hung in the air. That evening, I drove to the small park near her neighborhood. Not to confront her. I didn't want to corner her, but to watch, to understand. Her street was quiet, lined with maple trees that rustled in the summer breeze. A few porch lights glowed softly. I parked far enough that no one would notice me. Her house looked unchanged. The same wreath on the door, the same warm lights in the living room, but I couldn't shake the image of Linda opening that door weeks ago, standing exactly where I should have been. I didn't get out of the car. I just watched the house until the sky deepened to navy. No movement, no silhouette. I wasn't sure what I expected to learn, but the act of being there made something in me click into place. I wasn't going to let fear paralyze me. I wasn't going to retreat into self-pity or confusion. I wasn't going to let strangers reshape the narrative of my own motherhood. I drove home with a sharper resolve. When I stepped back inside my house, I felt the change clearly. I wasn't the bewildered, wounded mother who'd seen that wedding photo for the first time. I was someone preparing, someone choosing to act. The first phase of the plan was simple. Learn who that woman was. Learn what role Linda played. Learn how they reached my daughter. And then, if necessary, reclaim my place, on my own terms. I placed the wedding photo face down on the nightstand, not to forget it, but to mark it as evidence, a signal that the next steps would be deliberate. Before going to bed, I whispered a quiet, steady promise into the dark. I will not be erased. By the next morning, my plan no longer felt abstract. It had shape, edges, consequences. I moved through the kitchen with an odd sense of purpose, as though I were preparing for a quiet war. My hands trembled only once when I opened my laptop to begin the first official step. I needed records. Something neutral, public, informational, nothing that could be twisted as intrusion. Emily's wedding had been held at a small private venue just outside town, and I knew they coordinated closely with vendors. If a stranger had stood in my place, someone must have documented her presence, intentionally or not. I drafted a polite inquiry to the venue, phrasing it as a mother who simply wished to collect a few keepsakes she'd missed. I asked if there were guest logs, additional photos, or even a program, the sort of things any absent parent might ask for. My finger hovered over the send button only briefly before I clicked it. By noon, the venue manager replied. Her tone was overly formal, a little stiff for such a simple question. "Hello, Mrs. Carter. Unfortunately, we are unable to release any materials related to the event without explicit permission from the couple. Thank you for understanding." It was a canned response, the kind you give when you want someone to go away quietly. But what unsettled me wasn't the refusal. It was how quickly it arrived, and how prepared it sounded, as if my inquiry had been anticipated. I stared at the email for a long moment, the hairs on my arms lifting. Someone knew I would ask. Someone wanted to make sure I stayed uninformed. I stepped away from the computer, pacing. My mind kept circling the same realization. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a structure. A system of barriers placed deliberately around my daughter. My next step was more personal. A risk, but a calculated one. I called Mary Delgado, an old friend of our family and someone who'd attended the wedding. She had always been honest with me, even blunt sometimes. If she'd seen anything strange, she wouldn't sugarcoat it. But the call rang 3 times, then 4, then went to voicemail. I hesitated, then tried again. This time it rang once, then switched to voicemail mid-ring. Someone had declined it. That was the moment the fear deepened. Not panic. This wasn't the kind of trembling terror you feel in an emergency. No, this was a colder, more thoughtful fear. The kind that tells you you're up against something organized. I left no message. Anything I said could be forwarded, twisted, used to paint me as emotional or unstable. I had no way of knowing who might be listening. Instead, I took a longer route into town, telling myself I needed air. But in truth, I wanted to think without the walls of my house closing in. I parked outside a small cafe I rarely visited. Neutral ground. That was where I received the next sign that I was being watched. I'd barely stepped in line when a notification vibrated in my pocket. Unknown number. Stop digging. The words were simple. No punctuation, no explanation. My mouth went dry. I read the message again, then a third time. Logic insisted it could have been spam, a misdial, something random. But instinct, quiet, precise instinct, told me it was connected. Someone knew I had begun to act. Someone didn't like it. For a moment, I considered leaving, but I forced myself to order a coffee, sit down, and breathe. I needed to think clearly. I needed to be the adult in a room no one else could see. After steadying myself, I decided on a different kind of official move, one that no one could block easily. I visited the county clerk's office, not to make accusations, not to cause a scene, simply to request a copy of the marriage license. It was public record. No one could deny me access. As I waited in line, I rehearsed neutral phrases. I'm gathering family documents. I'm organizing records after the wedding. I need it for my files. When I finally reached the counter, the clerk, a young man with kind eyes, typed in the names. His expression shifted, subtle, quick, but I saw it. He read the screen again, then looked at me, then at the screen. I'm sorry, he said carefully, but this request will need to be processed through the couple directly. I blinked, stunned. Marriage licenses are public record. Yes, ma'am, typically, but there's a note on this one. A note? My voice was barely above a whisper. He lowered his tone. It says, "Do not release without direct approval. There's an alert attached. I'm really sorry." An alert on a marriage license. That was not normal. That wasn't something a random clerk or overzealous wedding planner could simply add. Someone had gone out of their way to lock down even the most basic information. "Could you tell me who added the note?" I asked. He hesitated. It's labeled as an external request, authorized by the event coordinator. My breath hitched. "Linda?" He typed quickly, glanced at the monitor, then nodded almost imperceptibly. Yes. There it was, my first piece of direct evidence. Linda had interfered with a legal document, not altered it. She wasn't foolish enough to commit a felony, but she had placed a barrier around it. A barrier meant specifically to keep me out. I stepped out of the clerk's office into the bright afternoon sun, but the warmth did nothing to ease the cold settling in my chest. This was bigger than discomfort, bigger than emotional manipulation. Linda had extended her reach beyond my daughter's personal life and into official channels. Why? What was she protecting or hiding? I walked slowly toward my car, trying to keep my breathing steady. Every piece of this puzzle pointed back to the same conclusion. Someone wanted to rewrite the narrative of Emily's family. Someone wanted to remove me, not just socially, but institutionally. As I turned the key in the ignition, another message appeared on my screen. Unknown number. Last warning. I didn't reply. I didn't flinch. Instead, I whispered to myself quietly, firmly, "Now I know." This was my point of no return. I didn't go home right away. I drove around for nearly an hour, circling the block, passing through familiar intersections that suddenly felt foreign. The second message, "Last warning," flashed in my mind like a neon sign. Not angry, not emotional, just cold, controlled. Someone who believed they had the authority to direct my behavior. But fear wasn't enough to stop me now. If anything, it clarified things. Whoever was orchestrating this had crossed a line when they attached an alert to Emily's marriage license. That meant they were willing to use institutions to isolate me. That meant there were stakes I hadn't yet fully understood. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had already decided on my next step. I would speak to someone trained to handle situations where influence becomes coercion, someone who could help me understand what I was up against without escalating recklessly. Not the police. Not yet. There was nothing illegal to report, not by legal standards. But a family counselor or an attorney specializing in elder protection or undue influence. That was a door I could open without looking irrational. Inside, the house greeted me with its usual stillness, but now the silence had weight. I grabbed my notebook, sat at the dining table, and began outlining what I knew. Bullet points, timelines, names, behaviors. My plan wasn't a dramatic operation. It was clarity, documentation, structure, something tangible to hold on to when everything else blurred. That night, I drafted a long email to a family attorney recommended by my neighbor months earlier, back when she'd gone through her own complicated guardianship dispute. I didn't accuse anyone. I used phrases like family estrangement, possible third-party influence, concerns about identity misrepresentation. Neutral language, but clear enough to convey the seriousness. I didn't send it yet. I wanted one more night to think. But the antagonists didn't wait. Around 9, just as I was closing the curtains, a knock sounded at the door. 3 short raps, confident, not timid. I froze. No one ever came unannounced. I didn't open the door. Instead, I called out, "Who is it?" A woman's voice answered. Calm, smooth. "Mrs. Carter, it's Linda. We should talk." My stomach dropped. Of course she'd come. I'd stepped outside the perimeter she'd built around my daughter, and she knew. "I'm not opening the door," I said. My voice was steady, surprisingly so. "That's fine," Linda replied gently, as if this were a casual conversation between neighbors. "I just want to clear up some confusion. We've noticed you've been contacting people about the wedding. That's concerning." The word struck me more sharply than the knock. We, meaning she wasn't working alone, meaning she was speaking on behalf of a group, whether that meant her, Emily, or someone else entirely. I kept my hand on the doorknob, not turning it. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You emailed the venue. You reached out to a few guests." She paused. "You attempted to obtain the marriage license." My heartbeat thudded in my ears. "I didn't attempt anything inappropriate," I said. "I asked for public information." Linda exhaled, a soft, patient sigh. "Mrs. Carter, I'm trying to help you. Your involvement is becoming intrusive. It's causing Emily distress. You don't want to make things harder for her, do you?" The words were carefully crafted, wrapped in concern, but with a blade hidden inside. I remained silent. "Please understand," Linda continued. "Emily asked for boundaries. She needs space from certain influences that aren't good for her. Influences. The same word Emily had used. I felt heat rise in my chest. Anger, sharp and clean. "Are you calling me an influence?" I asked. "Not intentionally harmful," she said gently, "but destabilizing. You don't realize how intense your presence can be for her." A surge of clarity washed over me. She wasn't here to talk. She was here to define reality, to rewrite my role and place me neatly outside the circle. "I won't continue this conversation," I said. "Please leave." There was a long pause. Then Linda said with the lightest edge of threat, "I hope you make the right choices, for everyone's sake." Her footsteps retreated. The porch light flickered as she walked away, casting her shadow long across the lawn. I locked the door the moment she disappeared. That night I barely slept. Every creak of the house tightened my chest. Every vibration from my phone made me jump. But beneath the fear was something steadier, something that hadn't been there before Linda's visit: certainty. She had confronted me because she felt threatened, because I was getting closer, and that meant my instincts had been right. The next morning, I sent the attorney's email without hesitation. When I received an automatic confirmation of receipt, a small sense of agency returned. Then I forced myself to follow rule number 1 for survival in situations like this: self-regulation. If I allowed fear to take the wheel, Linda would win. People like her operated on others' emotional instability. So I stepped away for one day. I drove to a small lake an hour outside town, a place Emily and I used to visit when she was young. I walked along the narrow path by the water, listening to the wind ripple against the surface. I watched a pair of older men fishing quietly, the orange bobbers dipping in the afternoon sun. For a few hours, I let myself simply exist. But even here, far from Linda's influence, the questions crept back. Who was that woman at the wedding? Why had she been given my place? What story had been told about me? And how deep did Linda's involvement truly run? When I returned home, the house felt different again. But this time, the stillness didn't suffocate me. I'd taken an official step. I'd put a professional between myself and whatever web Linda was weaving. Yes, the threats had escalated. Yes, the hostility was becoming explicit. But in pushing back, Linda had revealed her hand, and she had underestimated me. And when I woke the next morning, there was a stiffness in my chest. Not fear this time, but a bracing readiness. Linda had made her move. Now she would wait to see if I buckled. People like her always expected their pressure to work the first time, or the second. And when it didn't, they switched tactics. They softened, they coaxed. They spun stories designed to make you question your own resolve. I expected that shift. What I didn't expect was how quickly it came. Around midday, I received a text message from Emily. Not a voice note, not a call, just a single, carefully phrased text. "Mom, can we talk soon? I think things got too heated." My breath caught. Not from joy, but from suspicion. Emily never used that kind of diplomatic wording. That was Linda's tone, soft, apologetic, but controlled. A tone meant to disarm. I typed a response, then erased it. Typed again. Erased again. I wasn't ready. Not until I understood how much of this message came from my daughter and how much from the woman who'd shown up on my porch the night before. Instead, I replied, "We can talk, but not today." I stared at the screen, half expecting a storm. Instead, minutes later, another message came, this time from an unknown number. "We appreciate your openness. Let's all aim for peace." Peace. That word again, always used by people who want you passive, agreeable, compliant. I put the phone down and exhaled slowly, grounding myself in the rhythm of the breath. Calm wasn't just a posture now. It was a strategy. If I reacted emotionally, they would call me unstable. If I pushed too hard, they could accuse me of harassment. But if I stayed measured, unshakable, they'd have no narrative to weaponize against me. Around 2 o'clock, my doorbell rang again. I froze for an instant, dreading Linda's return, but when I looked through the peephole, I saw someone I hadn't expected. Mary Delgado, the friend who declined my call days earlier. She looked unsettled, shifting from foot to foot, clutching a small paper bag. When I opened the door, her eyes flicked to the hallway behind me as though checking whether we were alone. "Mary?" I asked cautiously. "I brought you something," she said quickly, lifting the bag. "Lemon muffins. I thought you might like them." She wasn't here for muffins. I stepped aside, letting her in. The moment the door closed, Mary's shoulders sagged. "I'm sorry I didn't answer the other day," she said. "I wasn't allowed to." "Allowed?" The word jolted me. She nodded, wringing her hands. "When Emily saw your name on my call log, she told me it would be better if I didn't get involved. Then Linda followed up and said talking to you right now might complicate things. She made it sound like you were under stress." There it was, the narrative, the one they'd tried to impose on me. "Mary," I said quietly, "do you think I'm unstable?" Her head snapped up. "No. God, no. I didn't believe a word of it. But I was afraid. They made it seem like if I spoke to you, I'd be dragged into something messy." Linda again, always watching, always positioning herself as the authority. "I didn't want to stay silent," Mary added, "but I needed to think." "And now?" She met my eyes. "Now I want to know what's going on because something isn't right with that woman, Linda. She acts like she owns Emily." A tightness spread through my chest, not dread but gratitude. The smallest form of support can feel like a rope tossed to someone drifting in deep water. "Tell me everything you noticed," I said. Mary sat at the dining table, glancing around nervously as she spoke. "At the wedding," she said, "there was this tension, like everyone was following someone's instructions. And then that woman, your look-alike, kept close to Emily, uncomfortably close. People whispered about it, but no one dared ask." My pulse quickened. "Did anyone call her by name?" "No. She didn't introduce herself, just smiled. Honestly, it gave me chills, like she was performing happiness." Performing? Yes, that was exactly how it had felt in the photo. "And Linda?" I asked. Mary's lips tightened. "She was everywhere, talking to vendors, directing guests, acting like she had authority. But she wasn't family, right? So why was she running everything?" "Good question. Emily seemed different," Mary continued, glassy-eyed, like she was repeating lines someone fed her. Something electric went through me, fear, anger, certainty. "You felt it too," I whispered. Mary nodded. "Something's wrong and I don't know what. But if you're looking for help, I won't stand aside this time." Those words steadied me more than anything had in weeks. "Thank you," I said. She placed a hand over mine, tentatively but sincerely. "Just be careful. They're watching everything." I knew she wasn't exaggerating. The messages, the alert on the license, Linda's late-night visit, their sudden friendliness the next day. This wasn't random. This was strategy. After Mary left, I made tea, sat by the window, and let myself process what had just happened. The antagonists weren't simply pushing me away. They were managing the entire social circle around Emily, controlling who spoke, who knew, who stayed silent. But their attempt to isolate me had backfired. I had support now, a witness, a second pair of eyes that saw the cracks. That afternoon, as I folded laundry in quiet, deliberate movements, another text from Emily arrived. "I'm making time for us soon. I miss you." Soft, sweet, exactly the tone Linda wanted her to use. I replied calmly, "We'll talk when I'm ready." Because I wasn't the one spinning. I wasn't the one scrambling. They were. Their sudden warmth wasn't kindness. It was surveillance disguised as reconciliation. It was pressure disguised as peace. And for the first time, I felt something close to power in holding my ground, in giving them nothing to react to. Cold calm is its own kind of strength. By evening, the sky outside had turned a muted violet. I stood on the back porch, looking out at the ferns I'd nearly killed from neglect earlier that month. I touched one leaf gently. "I'm not alone anymore," I murmured. The antagonists had pulled back, watching from a distance, waiting, recalculating. But I wasn't the woman they thought they could corner. I had clarity, I had resolve, and now I had an ally. Mary's visit hadn't even faded into memory before the next move came. I had expected the antagonists to circle back eventually. They weren't the type to allow a shift in power without response, but I didn't anticipate how quickly or how directly they would escalate. 2 days later, a knock came at my door. Not the sharp, commanding rhythm Linda had used before. This one was soft, hesitant, almost apologetic. I looked through the peephole and felt my stomach tighten. Emily. Her shoulders were hunched, her hair pulled into a loose knot, her eyes darting nervously toward the street as if someone were watching her from a car I couldn't see. For a moment, despite everything, my heart surged toward her. My daughter, my only child, standing on my porch like she didn't know whether she was welcome. I opened the door but left the screen door closed. "Mom," she whispered, "can we talk?" I nodded slowly and unlatched the door. But the moment she stepped in, I sensed another presence behind her, a shadow at the edge of the porch, a figure waiting. Linda. She lingered 2 steps back, hands clasped, expression perfectly neutral. "I hope it's all right if I join," she said politely, as though this were a brunch visit. We wanted to clear the air. We. Always we. As if she and my daughter were a single unit. I swallowed hard. This is between me and Emily. Linda tilted her head with theatrical gentleness. "Of course, I'm just here for support." "Support for whom?" Emily's eyes flicked between us like she was caught between 2 competing scripts. "I just want peace," Emily murmured. "I feel like things have gotten twisted." I gestured for Emily to sit on the couch, but Linda followed her, sitting so close their shoulders touched. The messaging was clear. Any conversation with my daughter would include her. Emily took a deep breath. "Mom, I know you've been upset and confused. I know the wedding was difficult." "Difficult," I repeated, my voice steady but tight. "You asked me not to come." Emily winced. "It wasn't because I don't love you. I just needed space." Linda gently placed a hand on Emily's arm. "You were overwhelmed. It was the healthiest choice you could make." I felt something cold and sharp coil in my chest. Emily continued, eyes wet now. "Linda helped me understand a lot of things about our relationship, patterns I wasn't aware of. Patterns. Another word that didn't belong to Emily. I forced myself to stay still. What patterns? Emily hesitated. She opened her mouth, but Linda spoke first. "Sometimes," Linda said, "children internalize stress from parents without realizing it. The intensity, the expectations." "What expectations?" I interrupted. Linda smiled sympathetically, like a therapist performing for an audience. "Your desire to be involved in every detail of her life. It created pressure." "I wasn't involved," I snapped. "You replaced me." Emily flinched, and Linda gave her a small, reassuring squeeze, as though protecting her from my words. "Mom," Emily whispered, "I didn't replace you." Her eyes drifted down, and in that moment I believed her. She hadn't planned to replace me, but Linda had. I breathed slowly. Who was the woman at the wedding? Emily stiffened. Linda's face remained serene. Someone close to the family, Linda said smoothly. Close to the family? I stared at her. I've never seen her before. Linda's tone stayed gentle, but her eyes hardened. She stepped in when you chose not to attend. I didn't choose. You told her. I stopped. The shift happened in the air, a tightening, a warning glare from Linda. Emily's voice trembled. Mom, please don't accuse people. That's not healthy. Healthy. Another word from Linda's script. Emily, I said softly, look at me. She did, and for a moment the fog lifted. My daughter's real eyes met mine. Confusion, hurt, longing. A silent help me. Linda sensed it instantly. She stood. I think we should pause. This isn't productive. I rose too. You don't get to decide what's productive. Linda's voice sharpened, still soft, but with steel underneath. You're escalating. This is exactly what we talked about. We, I echoed. You mean the sessions where you coached my daughter into believing I'm unstable? Emily stood as well, distressed. Mom, stop. Linda is helping. She's the only one who... The only one who what? I pressed. The only one who listens, Emily burst out. You always jump to conclusions. You always make everything about you. I inhaled slowly. That line wasn't entirely false. I had been protective, perhaps overly so at times, but the precision of the phrasing, the timing, felt rehearsed. Linda stepped toward Emily, guiding her shoulders gently. Let's go. She's not in a place to have this conversation. Emily, I said, my voice low, controlled. You're allowed to talk to your own mother without anyone managing the dialogue. Linda's lips tightened. Her calm cracked. Just a hairline fracture, but visible. If you continue pushing, we will take steps to ensure Emily feels safe. There it was, the threat, clean and unambiguous. Emily looked terrified, not of me, but of the conflict between us. I straightened. Emily, I love you. That will never change. But I won't allow someone else to rewrite our relationship. Linda pulled her toward the door. We're done here. But just before they stepped out, Emily turned. Her face crumpled, and she said, barely audible, Why can't you just let things be simple? Because they're not simple, I replied quietly. And someone is making sure they stay that way. Linda yanked the door open with more force than she intended. Her mask slipped for a split second. Rage, sharp and unfiltered. Then she composed herself, placing a hand on Emily's back in a gesture meant to look comforting. They left without another word. When the door closed, the house felt colder than it ever had. I stood there, hands trembling, not from fear, but from the clarity that had sharpened into certainty. I was right about Linda, right about the manipulation, right that they were escalating. And the fear I felt now wasn't the kind that weakens you. It was the kind that hardens into resolve. I whispered into the empty room, the words cutting through the silence. You overplayed your hand, Linda. For the rest of the day after Emily and Linda left, the house seemed to hold its breath. Every room felt sharper, as if the air itself understood that something irreversible had just happened. Linda had shown her hand. She'd come into my home, controlled the conversation, spoken for my daughter, issued threats dressed up as concern. And in doing so, she'd revealed the one thing I hadn't yet been able to prove. She was afraid of what I might uncover. By that evening, my fear had settled into something steadier. I wasn't shaking anymore. I was thinking, calculating, planning. The attorney I'd emailed earlier that week finally responded. His message was brief but pointed. These behaviors constitute potential coercive control. We should talk in person. Bring any documentation you have. That was the validation I needed. Quiet, professional confirmation that I wasn't imagining any of this, that Linda's involvement wasn't support, but manipulation with a possible legal dimension. But before meeting him, I needed one more piece of proof, something concrete, something undeniable, and it came from an unexpected source. At 9:17 p.m., my phone buzzed, a text from Mary. "I need to show you something. Can I come over?" 10 minutes later, she arrived, breathless, holding her phone like it weighed 100 pounds. Once inside, she locked the door behind her without me asking. "Mary," I asked, "what happened?" She hesitated only a second before thrusting her phone into my hands. On the screen was a message thread between her and a mutual acquaintance, someone who'd been at the wedding, someone close enough to have overheard conversations. The message read, "It's weird. Linda kept telling people Emily's mom was unstable, said she had episodes, said she might show up and cause a scene. Everyone kept an eye out for her. She told them a replacement would stand in just in case." Replacement. The word hit like a physical blow. My throat tightened, but I didn't look away. I read it again, slower this time, making sure I absorbed every syllable. "So people expected me not to be there," I said quietly, "because she told them I might be a problem." Mary nodded. "She framed you before you even had the chance to show up." "And the woman who looked like me?" I asked. Mary swallowed. "Some people thought she was you. She introduced herself to a few guests as someone filling in so Emily wouldn't be stressed." I felt the room tilt slightly, not from confusion, but from the sheer audacity of it. Linda hadn't just influenced Emily, she'd crafted an entire narrative to erase me preemptively. "She created a false version of me," I whispered. Mary nodded grimly, and she made sure everyone believed it. The anger that rose in me wasn't the hot, wild rage I feared I might feel. It was cold, clean, focused, like something sharpening inside my ribcage. "Thank you," I told Mary. This changes everything." She reached for my hand. "I'm with you, whatever comes next." After she left, I sat alone with the evidence glowing on my screen. The truth wasn't fragmented anymore. It had shape and weight. Linda hadn't supported my daughter. She'd isolated her. Not by force, but by narrative, by reputation, by quietly poisoning the social well. Now I had to expose her. Not in a way that made me look hysterical. Not in a way she could twist, but in a way she couldn't avoid. And for that, I needed one more witness, someone she couldn't manipulate. I scrolled through my contacts and paused on a name I hadn't used in years. Pastor Reynolds. He'd known me and Emily since she was a child. He'd officiated her baptism. He had credibility, neutrality, and a protective instinct for his congregation. I texted him, "I need a meeting tomorrow morning. It's important." He replied within minutes. "Of course, come by at 9. I slept lightly that night, restless but steady. I kept seeing Emily's face as she whispered, "Why can't you just let things be simple?" And beneath that, the real message. I don't know who to believe. In the morning, I dressed carefully. Nothing dramatic, just clean lines, neutral colors, something that conveyed calm. Not the mother Linda was painting me as. The church was nearly empty when I arrived. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, scattering soft color across the wooden floor. Pastor Reynolds greeted me warmly, concern lining his features. "What's going on?" he asked. I took out my notebook, the printed screenshot of Mary's message, and my phone. "Pastor," I said quietly, "someone has been rewriting who I am to my own daughter." I told him everything, not with emotion, but with detail, with dates, facts, quotes, interactions. His expression darkened with every sentence. "You're describing a pattern of coercion," he said finally, "and manipulation." "I need someone Emily trusts," I said. "Someone neutral, someone Linda can't influence." He nodded. "I'll reach out. Carefully. Emily deserves the truth from more than one voice." Before I could respond, his office door opened. My heart froze. Emily stood in the doorway, breathing hard, eyes wide as if she'd run all the way here. And behind her, stepping into the room like she belonged there, Linda. Her smile was thin, brittle. "Mrs. Carter, pastor, what an unexpected gathering." The pastor rose, calm but firm. "Linda, this is my office. If you're here to observe—" "I'm here," Linda said sharply, "because she jabbed a manicured finger toward me, is interfering with my client." "Client?" The word burned. "Emily," I said softly, "is this how she refers to you now?" Emily backed up a step, torn between us. Linda moved beside her, tone icy. "We know you've been spreading lies, contacting people, trying to undermine Emily's support system." "Support system?" I echoed. "Or control system." Linda snapped, "You're unstable!" Pastor Reynolds stepped between us. "I've known her for decades. She is not unstable." Linda faltered, just for a moment, a crack in the armor. I took the opening. I held up Mary's printed screenshot. "This is what you told people, that I might cause a scene, that a replacement would stand in for me. You set the stage long before the wedding." Emily's eyes darted to the paper. "Linda, is that true?" Linda's face shifted, calculating, cornered. "People misunderstood." "No," I said quietly. "They understood exactly what you wanted them to." Emily looked at Linda then, really looked at her. Something flickered across her expression, something breaking, something waking. "Did you—" Emily swallowed. "Did you tell them my mom was unstable?" Linda hesitated. Not long, but long enough. Emily stepped away from her. Away. The crack widened. I felt the shift, the turning, the truth finally breaching the surface. The confrontation had begun, and Linda was losing control. Linda's hesitation lasted less than a second, but it was enough. I saw it land in Emily's eyes like a stone through glass. Something shifted in her, sharp, fast, undeniable. Doubt, recognition, a memory trying to surface. "Emily," Pastor Reynolds said gently, "you're safe here. No one will pressure you." Linda's jaw clenched. "Emily, don't let them confuse you. I've protected you. I've been the only one supporting you through all this chaos your mother created." The pastor frowned. "She created nothing. She simply asked questions." Emily looked back and forth between us, confused, breath trembling. "Linda, why didn't you tell me you talked to the guests about my mom?" Linda stepped forward, too close, too quick. "Because I knew you couldn't handle it. You've always needed guidance. You fall apart under emotional strain." The words cut the air like a slap. I flinched. Emily did too. Linda didn't notice, or she didn't care. "You panicked over every decision," she continued. "You leaned on me for everything. I did what was necessary." Emily blinked rapidly. Necessary to tell people my mother was unstable? Linda's mask cracked fully then. No soft smile, no therapeutic calm. just irritation. I had to keep the wedding peaceful. Your mother has always been dramatic. You know that. No, I said quietly. That's what you told her. Emily shook her head, stepping away from Linda slowly, as if realizing for the first time how close she'd been standing to danger. Linda reached for her arm, but the pastor stepped between them. No physical contact, he said, voice steel. Linda glared. This is absurd. Emily, you don't need them. You need me. No, Emily whispered. I don't. The moment was so fragile, I barely breathed. Emily's hand trembled as she looked at me. Mom, did you call the venue, the vendors? Did you try to get the license? Yes, I answered honestly, quietly, respectfully, because I knew something was wrong. Linda scoffed. She's manipulating you. She always has. Emily turned to her sharply. Then why did you need a replacement? Why did you tell people she had episodes? Why did you decide who I should be afraid of? Linda's mouth tightened. Because you're too naive to see danger. And you're the danger, Emily whispered. Linda's face contorted. Anger, disbelief, entitlement, all collapsing into something uglier. I took care of you. I arranged everything. I gave you stability. And you're going to throw that away because of... She pointed at me. Her? Emily straightened, and for the first time in months, I saw my daughter's real posture. Tall, steady, grounded. She's my mother, and she always has been. Linda laughed, short, sharp, humorless. You think she'll take care of you? She can't even take care of herself. You need someone competent, someone with a plan. Emily recoiled. You don't get to talk to me like that. You wouldn't have a wedding without me, Linda hissed. Then maybe I should have waited, Emily shot back. Waited until I could think for myself. The room went silent. Linda took one last gamble. Emily, if you walk away from me, you'll regret it. I know things about you, your insecurities, your mistakes. Do you really want those shared? The pastor's eyes widened. Is that a threat? Linda didn't answer, but the look she gave Emily was unmistakable. Emily stepped back as if slapped. You'd use my private struggles against me? If that's what it takes, Linda said. And that was it. The final break. Emily turned to the pastor. I need you to witness this. He nodded. Emily straightened her shoulders. Linda, this is the last time we're speaking. I want no further contact. Do you understand? Linda stared incredulous. You're making a mistake. Emily's voice didn't waver. No, I'm finally correcting one. I felt something inside me unclench. A knot I'd lived with for months evaporated. Linda saw it and her gaze snapped to me. You think you've won? I met her eyes calmly. There was nothing to win, just something to uncover. Her face contorted in fury, pure, unfiltered. You don't deserve her, she spat. I don't need to deserve her, I replied. I'm her mother, and you used her vulnerabilities for your own purpose. Her voice dropped to a cold whisper. You'll regret this. Pastor Reynolds lifted a hand. Linda, you need to leave. Now. Linda looked around the room, searching for an ally but finding none. The walls of her false narrative had collapsed. She backed toward the door, her breath uneven. You think she'll stay with you? She hissed. You think a single sentimental moment fixes everything? She'll fall apart without me. Emily stepped forward, not timid, not afraid, but firm. No, she said. I'll fall apart because of what you did to me, and now I'm done. Linda froze, stunned, wounded, enraged. She looked at me one last time, eyes burning with a promise of vengeance, but she had lost. Every lie she'd spun had unraveled in seconds. She pushed the door open and stormed out. The echo of her footsteps down the hall sounded like the end of a rain. When the door finally clicked shut, Emily collapsed into my arms, sobbing, shaking, clinging to me like I was the only stable surface left in the world. "I'm so sorry," she cried. "I didn't know. I didn't see—" "I know," I whispered, holding her tight. "It's over now." Pastor Reynolds stood quietly, giving us space, but his expression told me everything. Linda wasn't just defeated socially, she had exposed herself, legally, ethically, fully. Emily pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Mom, I want to fix this. All of it." I squeezed her hands gently. "We will. Together." For the first time in months, I felt the world realign. Clear, solid, true. The climax had passed. The antagonist was undone. My daughter had returned, not manipulated, not distorted, but herself. And I had my footing again. In the days that followed Linda's unraveling, the world became strangely quiet, like a house after a long storm. Not peaceful yet, but suspended, waiting for the dust to settle. Emily stayed with me those first few nights. She brought an overnight bag, then a second, and by the third evening her toothbrush sat in my bathroom cabinet like it never left. We didn't talk about everything at once. We approached the truth gently, circling it the way one approaches a bruise, carefully, knowing it would hurt to press. I cooked simple dinners, chicken soup, steamed vegetables, toast. Emily ate slowly, her hands trembling at first, then steadying. Every time she lifted her eyes to meet mine, I saw the same mixture of guilt and relief. "Mom," she said on the third night, "I don't know how I let it get that far." "That's how people like her work," I told her. "They don't push all at once, they chip away." She stared at her bowl. I thought she was helping me. I really did. "You were vulnerable," I said gently. "You trusted someone who saw that and used it." Emily nodded, wiping her cheek quickly. "I want to make things right. Not overnight, but I want us back." And for the first time in months, I felt hope without fear attached to it. Outside our home, consequences moved swiftly. Pastor Reynolds arranged a quiet meeting with the attorney. Emily came with me. Her choice, not mine. She sat beside me, back straight, shoulders tense, but her voice didn't shake as she described how Linda had inserted herself into her life. The subtle isolation, the manufactured fears, the pressure to cut me out. She told him about the replacement woman, the coaching, the threats whispered under the guise of protection. The attorney took notes, face unreadable, but when Emily finished, he nodded. "This meets the criteria for coercive control," he said, "and depending on how she accessed certain information, possibly more." Emily exhaled shakily. I saw the guilt twisting inside her, but the attorney raised a hand gently. "This isn't your fault," he said. "People like Linda are very good at disguising manipulation as guidance." For Emily, those words mattered more than any I could offer. She needed an outside voice, someone she couldn't dismiss as biased. We left the office lighter. The ripple effects didn't stop there. Word spread quietly among the wedding guests. Mary, the photographer, the florist, even the venue manager. Not through gossip, but through corrections. Gentle, actually, that wasn't true statements. Subtle acknowledgments. People who had once believed Linda's narrative began to question it. One evening, the photographer emailed me privately. "I'm sorry. I didn't know the woman wasn't you. Linda handled everything. I thought it was unusual, but she said you'd agreed to stay away for health reasons." Health reasons. Another lie. But the email wasn't what mattered. It was the shift, the reversal, the quiet reformation of the social landscape Linda had poisoned. Her web was dissolving thread by thread. As for the replacement woman, her identity came out sooner than I expected. The attorney discovered she'd been hired as part of what Linda called a comfort continuity plan, a phrase so absurdly corporate it would have been laughable if the implications weren't devastating. She wasn't a relative. She wasn't even a professional actor. She was an acquaintance of Linda's from a community group, someone who resembled me enough that, with the right hairstyle and outfit, she could pass in the blur of a busy wedding day. A living prop. The woman had been told I'd refused to attend due to emotional instability and that she was doing Emily a kindness by maintaining calm. She panicked when she learned the truth and contacted the attorney herself, giving a full statement. The chain of accountability tightened. But the biggest change wasn't legal. It was personal. Emily and I began rebuilding slowly. We started with morning walks, a simple ritual. Nothing heavy, no probing questions, just the rhythm of our steps matching on the neighborhood path. Some days she talked, some days we said nothing at all. Healing isn't loud, it's a whisper repeated consistently. One morning she stopped mid-walk and asked, "Mom, did you ever think you'd lose me?" I didn't pretend. "Yes." She swallowed. "I'm so sorry." I touched her arm. "You're here now, that's what matters." Her eyes softened, the first true softness I'd seen in her since before the engagement. Meanwhile, Linda's world began collapsing from the inside. Her involvement at the wedding planning group was revoked. Several vendors formally barred her from future events. Her consulting services, which had relied on reputation rather than credentials, evaporated. A few families stepped forward, sharing their own unsettling experiences. Quiet patterns of pressure and subtle overreach they'd once dismissed as over-involvement. Without influence, Linda had nothing to stand on. She disappeared from the social sphere she'd once dominated. For the first time, I felt not satisfaction, not vengeance, but justice. A settling of balance. At home, Emily helped me repot my ferns in the backyard. She wore old gardening gloves that were too big for her, and the soil left dark streaks across her wrists. She laughed when one of the pots cracked under her grip. "Mom, you really need sturdier containers." "I'll teach you which ones last," I said. She smiled. "Good, I want to learn." The simplicity of it, the quiet rebuilding of ordinary life, felt like a victory all its own. Weeks later, I received a small envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single sentence in careful handwriting. "I hope you know you were right to fight." No signature. I didn't need one. I folded the note gently and tucked it between pages of my notebook, the notebook where this entire story began. My life hadn't returned to what it was before. It had become something steadier, clearer, defined not by fear but by awareness. The world felt solid beneath my feet again, and for the first time in a long while, so did I. Maybe you've lived through something similar, someone rewriting your story, your relationships, your place in the world. Maybe you've questioned your own memory, your own instincts, just to keep the peace. So let me ask you this. What would you have done in my place? Would you have stepped back, stayed quiet, or would you have fought for the truth, even when everyone else doubted you? If this story resonated with you, leave a comment, share your thoughts, join the community. There are more stories like this, real, raw, unsettling, waiting for you on my channel.